All right, so now the waiting starts because the hush money trial is now in the hands of the jury, which I am so scared that this is going to turn into a hung jury. I really, really am. But let's get right to the article. After nearly 24 witnesses, 16 days of testimony, and hours of lawyers' closing arguments, it's time for the jurors to have their say in Donald Trump's hush money trial. And yes, I found out later last night that while I was doing my video on what went on yesterday, I didn't realize that closing arguments were still going on. Jury deliberations began Wednesday in the first criminal trial of a former U.S. president. The 7-man, 5-woman panel is tasked with deciding whether Trump is guilty of any of 34 felony counts of falsifying his company's records. Prosecutors say Trump falsified the records to evade reimbursements to his then lawyer Michael Cohen, who had paid porn actor Stormy Daniels $130,000 in the final weeks of the 2016 campaign, not to air her claim that she and Trump had sex a decade earlier. The former president and presumptive Republican nominee has pleaded not guilty, denies any sexual interaction with Daniels, and argues that the payments to Cohen were correctly designated as legal expenses in company records. Right, because every interaction with the lawyer is lawyer stuff. Now that the case has gone to the jury, here's a look at how deliberations will work. If the jury convicts Trump, God, I hope they do, it must unanimously find who created a false entry in his company's records or caused someone else to do it, and that he did so with the intent of violating or concealing a violation of a state law, making it illegal for conspirators to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means. A conviction would mean that jurors all agreed that something unlawful was done to promote Trump's election, but they don't have to be unanimous on what the unlawful thing was. In this case, jurors could choose between 3 possible unlawful acts. They could find that one of the conspirators broke the Federal Elections Campaign Act, which in 2016 made it illegal for a person to give something worth more than $2,700 to a presidential campaign. It also banned corporations from contributing to a campaign. Okay, I don't see that one working. They could find that other business records were falsified, including federal tax forms that Trump's company issued to Cohen, bank records associated with Cohen's payment to Daniels, or an invoice used when the National Enquirer's parent company paid Karen McDougal, a former model who claimed to have had an affair with Trump, which he denied. They could find that false information was submitted on a tax return. For a conviction, each juror would have to find that at least one of those unlawful things happened. So, where do they happen, the deliberations? Behind closed doors in a room reserved for the jury. While the 12 deliberate, the 6 alternate jurors who have also observed the whole trial will be in a separate space in the courthouse. If a jury member is unable to continue because of illness or other reasons, an alternate juror will then take that person's place, and deliberations will begin anew. Yes, they have to pretend like they never deliberated in the first place and start over with this new juror. Now, how that works in practice, well, how do you forget everything you said? Jurors went into deliberation after getting detailed instructions on the relevant laws in the case. what must be proven in order for them to convict, and their duty to acquit if it's not proven. They had to hand over their cell phones to court officers to hold, which makes perfect sense. You don't want any distractions. You don't want people looking things up on their own about the case. So, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, what will we know about the discussions? Very little. The deliberations are secret, though jurors whose identities are being kept from the public can have a court officer deliver notes from them to the judge. The first came about 3.5 hours into deliberations, when the jury asked to rehear some testimony from Cohen and former National Enquirer publisher David Pecker. Then, while the attorneys and court were gathering that testimony, jurors sent a request to rehear Judge Juan Merchan's instructions on the laws applicable to the case. Merchan read the jurors' notes in court and discussed with prosecutors and defense lawyers how to respond. Then jurors were brought into court for a question from the judge, whether they wanted all of the legal instructions or just part. After explaining that they could answer by note, he sent them home for the evening. Okay. The rereading will begin Thursday morning and will be done aloud from the trial transcript. Jurors don't have the transcript in the jury room, but do have a court laptop loaded with documents and other materials that were shown during the trial. So they should have access to the testimony then. Court watchers sometimes speculate about what the contents of a note might imply about the deliberations, but there's no way to know for sure. Jurors also send a note to signal when they have reached a verdict, or sometimes to say that they're bogged down. All right, where will Trump be in the meantime? He doesn't have to stay in the courtroom itself, but must be in the building. During the trial, he and his attorneys and security personnel have had the use of a courtroom access hall for breaks. Ay. How about proofreading? All right, so how long will jurors deliberate? I didn't expect them to deliberate this long. As long as they need to. The standard court day runs from 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., with a break for lunch. Jurors' meals will be delivered, of course, because they can't have access to the outside world. So that makes sense. But judges sometimes extend the hours if jurors wish. There's no limit on how many days deliberation can continue. All right, do jurors get to go home? Yes, at the end of each court day. Once upon a time, they couldn't do that. The jury isn't sequestered. The legal term for isolating the panel from the outside world. That was once mandatory for many felony cases in New York State, but the requirement was lifted in 2001, and a sequestration is now rare. All right, what happens if there's a verdict? Jurors will send a note via a court officer saying there is a verdict, but not what it is, which would explain why you get notifications saying the verdict is in, but they don't actually know what the verdict is. The judge will summon Trump, his defense team, and prosecutors back to the courtroom if they're not there already, and then announce that the jury has reached a verdict. Then the jury will be brought in, and the foreperson in New York, that job generally goes to the first juror chosen, will be asked whether the jury has reached a verdict. If the answer is yes, the foreperson will then be asked what the verdict is for each count and will answer either guilty or not guilty. Then the jury likely will be asked collectively, is this your verdict? Prosecutors or defense lawyers also can ask to have each juror ask the same question individually. Okay, what happens if there isn't a verdict, which is my fear? If jurors send a note saying they can't agree, the judge, in consultation with both sides, must decide what to do next. Defense lawyers might seek an immediate mistrial. That could be granted, but often the response is to call the jury in for some form of instruction to keep trying. Prosecutors and defense lawyers often debate what should be said. Judges may look at the New York court system sample language for what's known as a modified Allen charge. It urges jurors to make every possible effort to reach a verdict and to be willing to reconsider their positions without abandoning their conscience or judgment just to go along with the others. If deadlock notes continue, the message may be repeated or tweaked. So too, arguments for a mistrial. There's no hard and fast rule about how long a jury must keep attempting to resolve differences before a mistrial can be declared. So that is the article. So as you heard, there is no verdict yet. The day ended with Judge Merchan finding out what part of the instructions they wanted to be retold. And it sounds like they want the whole thing retold to them. So instead of doing it tonight, I guess it was late already and he just, didn't feel he had the time to do it or whatever. But for whatever reason, he decided to start fresh tomorrow with the rehashing of the jury instructions and then sending them to deliberate for the rest of the day. Just like they did today. Which would make sense that everybody is starting fresh. They're treating it like yesterday, or in this case today, didn't happen, and they're just starting anew. So that makes sense. Anyway, at least as far as the jury instructions go. So anyway, that is all I have for this article. And in other Trump news, before I forget, the classified documents case, which is being heard by Aileen Cannon, well, she's now chastising Jack Smith for not properly discussing with the defense team reinstituting a gag order or modifying a gag order because Trump has decided that he's going to attack the FBI for language on the search warrant that all search warrants actually have. For those who aren't aware, it was picked up by conservative media that, or possibly it started with Trump, who knows, that the search warrant said, talked about possible use of deadly force. And so the conservative media is losing their collective minds that Biden is trying to assassinate Trump. First off, all search warrants tell law enforcement that if deadly force is necessary, they can use deadly force because you never know what you're going to be encountering when executing the search warrant. So, of course, if you need to use deadly force, then you need to use deadly force. That is not what happened here. First off, there was no need to use deadly force. Why? Because the FBI actually talked with Trump's defense team to make sure neither he nor his family were in Florida when they executed the search warrant, which Why are you telling the bad guy that you're going to look for classified documents on this day when they can hide it? It's like, oh, we've got to move these things before the FBI comes on this day. What are you doing? So, and apparently that this is just another one of, let's treat Trump differently from everybody else. So yeah, that's the thing. Now, number 2, as far as Trump freaking out that Biden wants him dead. Now, first off, we all know the DOJ has nothing to do with Biden. Just because Trump thinks that the DOJ is his personal attack dog does not mean that other presidents see it as such. I mean, it's always been an independent body. So, but let's pretend that they're not an independent body, like Trump wants. Trump is trying, in his immunity case, to claim that the president can send SEAL Team 6 to assassinate his political rival, and he cannot be prosecuted for that. He's immune from that. And now he's whining that the very scenario that was concocted as something the president can do, he's now whining is trying to be done to him. It's like, wait, you're the one who's trying to claim that it's okay for you to do that. But when it's done to you, suddenly it's not okay for the president to do that? It's almost like this has nothing to do with logic and facts and reality. It's just you're a narcissistic asshole who wants to have everything his way. So anyway, that is probably all I have on what's happening with Trump right now. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video.